Hey everybody, how's it going? Today I'd like to explain in a simple fashion why inflation is evil, how it affects small business owners, and why it sucks. And I'd also like to try to answer the question that shows up in many of my videos as to why wages don't always go up with inflation. I've tried to speak from the employee's perspective in several videos I've done recently because I've heard a lot of employers complain and whine about a labor shortage and how they can't hire anybody, yet I haven't had any problems over the past 2 years hiring people at all. I've had no problems finding people to fix MacBooks in my business. I think part of it is because I remember what it was like to be an employee. And from these 3 videos I've done, I think, and I could tell from the like or dislike rate here, that there are a lot of employees that I imagine share my perspective. And I remember what it was like to be an employee. I remember what it was like to work at small businesses that were managed horribly. And I kind of remember what it was like to get treated like shit. I try not to do that in my current business. But what I'd like to do here is I'd like to try to explain the small business owners, the employer's perspective here with regards to why inflation is evil and why wages don't always go up with inflation. It's not a very sexy perspective, and it's not one that has an easy slogan on how to fix it, so it's not one that I think is very popular or discussed. So let's just go over one of the most common things, which is why don't you raise your wages when inflation goes up, or why don't you raise your prices so that you can pay people more money when inflation starts to creep its ugly head? That's a good question. Why shouldn't you get paid more? You do the same work today that you did yesterday, but today your paycheck buys you less food, less gas, and pays less of your apartment rent than it did yesterday. If you have an apartment lease and your apartment lease is up and you pay $1,300 a month, now you go to Craigslist and every apartment available in your neighborhood is $1,600. You go to the grocery store and your bill that used to be $400 a month is now $500 a month. And you go to the gas station, and I'm not even going to get into the gas station because honestly that's just effing depressing. You get the idea. If everything around you costs more, why don't you get paid more? Good question. So I'm going to go over how my business works, how pricing works, and how price increases work. Everybody that walks into a repair business has a formula in their head. They may not be aware of it, but they do. And that formula goes something like this. My device is $1,000. I'm willing to spend 33% or 1/3 the cost of what it is to replace this device with a new one to fix it. Or my device is $600 in the used market. Now I paid $1,000 for it new. It's $600 in the used market. I'm willing to spend 33% of the cost to replace it in the used market to fix it, which comes out to $200. Now that percentage is going to be different for the type of repair that you need and that individual person. People have a sliding scale of what it is they're willing to spend. Some people don't value their time that much, so they could buy a new one and set everything up and take the time to sell their old device on Craigslist or eBay or whatever. And some people just don't want to be bothered with it. They just want to show up, make this work again. They don't even care if it costs a little bit more. But everybody has that idea in their head. They're willing to spend a percentage of what the device costs to replace to fix it. And this makes sense. It is completely normal for somebody to say, I'm willing to spend 50% or 60% or 70 or 30 or 20% what it costs to replace it. Because that's what you're talking about. When you're talking about repair, the alternative to repair is replacing it with a new one. So let's just take a look at inflation as measured in the commodity that I deal with most, the MacBook. We're not talking about gas, rent, or groceries, the MacBook, because that formula is going to be based on what a MacBook costs new or what a MacBook costs new. Remember, the customer is going to be willing to pay a percentage of what it costs to replace their MacBook to fix it. In 2016, if you wanted a 13-inch MacBook Pro, it was $1,299. In 2021, if you want a MacBook Pro 13-inch, starts at $1,299. If you want to buy a 13-inch MacBook Air, the entry-level 13-inch MacBook Air in July of 2016 on Apple.com, $999. If you want to buy the entry-level 13-inch MacBook Air from Apple right now, it looks like that starts at $999. So inflation, as measured in the MacBook, is zero. Inflation, as measured in everything else, has gone up incredibly. Your rent is more expensive. Your food is more expensive. Your gas and transportation are more expensive. But the MacBook price remains the same. So what does that mean? It means that I have limited ability to raise my price. If I raise my price, then that means that there are going to be more customers where my price for repair is over their percentage threshold. If I go over their percentage threshold, they sell their existing MacBook, buy a new one, set it up from scratch, rather than get it fixed through me. Or they just deal with it being broken. So once I go over that threshold, I lose business. Now, my price can only go up if one of two things happens. A, people are willing to spend a higher percentage on repairs today than they were yesterday. That hasn't happened. Or B, the base price of replacing their device goes up so that even if they're still only willing to spend 30% the cost of a new one to replace it, that is a higher value because the cost of a new one is now more, which again, that has not happened. As you can see here, inflation as measured in the MacBook is 0. So that means that I can't raise my prices without losing business. Another factor to be considered is that you will have many people that will show up to businesses after inflation happened that are actually willing to spend less. Not only are they not willing to spend more, they're willing to spend less. Why? Because their housing is more expensive. Their transportation is more expensive. Their groceries are more expensive. So now they have less discretionary income. They have less disposable income. They have less savings. If someone has less savings, that means they have less set aside to spend on a repair than they did before. So if they have less money for a repair, not only can I not raise my price, but I'm going to be expected to lower it. Now, if I can't raise my price without losing business, that means I have only a couple of ways to be able to pay people more. A, accept lower net profit margin for the business, or B, take in more business, figure out a way to take in more customers, which means more stress for the existing employees, which again may contribute to why many people do not want to return to their old jobs. Once you dial up the employee stress to the point where they are working too much, you wind up with a, quote, labor shortage where nobody wants to go to your crappy job for the pay that you're offering. And once you dial down the net profit to the point where it is 0 or below 0, you no longer have a functioning business and it disappears. And this is, again, one of the reasons that I say that inflation is evil, because inflation hits different businesses differently. Some businesses, some people will be able to ask more money for their products and services and have no problem. Other businesses are dealing with this specific formulation, which is if you go above a certain dollar value, then your service is no longer economically viable. Even if you're good at doing what you do, it just doesn't matter anymore. Your service is not economically viable. So you need to keep your cost at a certain region. You need to keep your prices within a certain region, or else you no longer are economically viable, and then you will no longer exist, even if you're good at what you do. Which is why I would prefer to address this at the point of inflation rather than at the point of the business. The business did not devalue the currency. Something else devalued the currency. Whether it is endless money printing, whether it is stupidly low interest rates, whether it is anything else, we have a situation right now where money is worth, at least US dollars, are worth less right now, considerably, than they were just several years ago. If you are don't be like the White House and try to measure inflation in fucking cheese. Yes, they actually did that. They were bragging about the fact that cheese was cheaper this year than it was in 2020 or 2019. My God, how more out of touch could you be with the average American citizen than that? But again, that's a rant for another video, which I did here. They actually seriously bragged that cheese is down 1% from where it was last year. My God. But I actually forgot where I was because I got so angry. There are businesses that will be able to raise their prices as a result of inflation, and there are others that will not. Inflation does not hit everyone evenly. Everybody cannot raise their prices and therefore raise their wages simply because somebody else devalued the currency. And I think it's as important as you may find it to focus on why are we not paying more. I think it's also important to focus on why is the currency continuously being devalued? Because that is what is leading to wages going down. It's inflation going up. Now, there are companies out there that do make more money year after year, even when you adjust for inflation, and they still pay their employees jack shit. And by all means, feel free to shit on them for doing that. There's a reason those companies are having, quote, labor shortages that I laid out in these videos, and I am not going to defend the companies that are paying you less year after year after year as they make more and more and more money. But there are a lot of small businesses out there, and maybe even some large companies, that cannot increase their prices simply because the currency was devalued, that are going to be seriously hurt by inflation. And that's why inflation is evil. It hits everybody differently. Everybody is not equally able to raise their prices and raise their wages simply because inflation happened. You have a lot of people who can raise their prices and wages, and you have a lot of others that if they raise their prices, they will lose business. Now, some may say, well, this doesn't make sense because as time goes on, you will become more efficient as a business owner, you will get more customers, you'll, become better at what you do, and that is true. Between 2013 and now, the manager of the store makes about 3.5 times as much money now as he did when he started. We are more profitable, at least we're more profitable in 2019 than we were in 2013. And we were able to perform services in 2019 way better than we did in 2013. And we also performed way more services in 2019 than in 2013. So because we were getting better as a business, always getting better as a business, our profit was going up, and therefore our ability to pay people was going up. But that is separate from inflation, which is where the cost of the product that we work on has stayed the same, but the cost of living for everybody else has gone up. And once you reach a plateau where your business kind of stops getting more efficient or better, and then you start getting hit by inflation, then you kind of wind up on the other side of that curve going this way, which, admittedly is kind of where I am at this point in time. That's why I find inflation to be evil. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. That's it for today. And as always, I hope you learned something. As I said, I am not trying to speak for every grocery store, every Walmart, every publicly traded company. I'm simply speaking from my own perspective for myself. Do you own a small business? If you do own a small business, how has inflation affected you? How has it affected your prices, your costs, your wages? And are you able to pass that on to your customer? Or do you have the type of customers where if you raise your prices 15 or 25%, they will tell you to go F yourself? I'm very curious. Let me know in the comments down below.